Wars rarely begin with one moment. They start with sparks, provocations, local clashes, political breakdowns, and creeping government control. Today, those sparks are multiplying. Drones over Europe, fighter jets testing NATO, the Middle East heating up, China rising in Asia, factories closing across Europe, political unrest shaking capitals, and extremist groups spreading chaos abroad. Put together, the pattern is unmistakable. The world is sliding toward World War III. Denmark was forced to shut down airports after unidentified drones circled overhead, a move that underscored just how disruptive a small unmanned craft can be. More recently, similar activity was reported above Karup Air Base, raising alarms about surveillance or probing missions. Germany faced its own scare when drones were investigated over military zones in Schleswig-Holstein. Norway tracked drones circling Öland, a critical hub that houses NATO's fleet of F-35 fighter jets. Poland, meanwhile, reported a staggering 23 drones crossing its border in a single night, an incursion serious enough to prompt immediate NATO consultations. Each appearance is more than a nuisance. Every flight is a deliberate test, a probe of defenses, and with it comes the ever-present risk of miscalculation. The threat is not confined to drones. In September, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets crossed directly into Estonian airspace, remaining there for 12 tense and high-stakes minutes. Estonia is NATO territory, and the implications of such an intrusion are enormous. Under the alliance's framework, any attack on a member state would automatically trigger Article 5, the principle of collective defense by all NATO members. A single wrong move, even a minor miscalculation or miscommunication during those 12 minutes, could have escalated a brief airspace violation into a full-scale war engulfing the continent. The stakes could not be higher, and the incident served as a stark reminder of how fragile European security can be when military provocations test the limits of alliances. The sparks are not limited to Europe's skies. The United States conducted strikes against Iranian nuclear sites at Natanz and Fordo, reigniting fears of escalation in the Middle East. Israel expanded its battlefield dramatically with a strike in Doha, Qatar, targeting Hamas leaders far beyond its usual sphere of conflict. In Ukraine, the grinding war shows little sign of ending. In neighboring Moldova, Russia fans fear by spreading stories of looming NATO invasions. And in February, a drone hit the Chernobyl plant, damaging its protective shell and sending shivers across the continent. These are no longer isolated clashes. Conflicts are crossing borders and continents, their reach stretching into a truly global pattern. As external threats grow, Europe also faces turmoil from within. In Slovakia, mass protests rise against Prime Minister Fico's pro-Russia tilt and his threats to pull the country from NATO. In the Netherlands, demonstrations in The Hague spiraled into violence, with running battles between protesters and police. France and Italy continue to face upheaval as migration pressures and austerity policies fuel near-constant street clashes. Serbia remains equally divided, where dueling political camps square off in daily demonstrations. Across the continent, politics has shed the pretense of civil debate. It has hardened into confrontation. Adding to Europe's unrest are mounting accusations of interference in national elections by the European Union itself. In Romania and other Eastern member states, critics allege that Brussels applies pressure behind the scenes, not only through regulations and official directives, but also by leveraging funding streams and quiet influence to tilt outcomes in favor of pro-the-European Union governments. For many voters, this feels less like democracy at work and more like manipulation from afar. The perception that sovereignty is being stripped away fuels suspicion, resentment, and in many cases, outright hostility toward the European Union institutions. What follows is a dangerous erosion of trust in the ballot box, the very foundation of democratic order. And when that trust collapses, cracks in stability appear, giving external enemies new ways to exploit disunity inside Europe. The continent's economic backbone is faltering at an alarming pace. In Antwerp, once a proud hub of chemical and steel production, facilities that employed thousands are closing as energy costs skyrocket. In Rotterdam, the great port city that powered European logistics and industrial processing, major plants are cutting back or shutting down entirely. Across Germany's Ruhr area, a region long synonymous with heavy industry, chemical giants and foundries scale back production, citing electricity bills that have become impossible to bear under soaring prices and strict EU regulatory demands. The cause is a toxic combination: rising energy and labor costs layered with the financial burdens of the European Union Green Deal. Factories that sustained Europe for generations are either relocating abroad or collapsing altogether. The consequences are visible everywhere: swelling unemployment, shrinking competitiveness, and a Europe increasingly dependent on foreign suppliers. An economy this weakened cannot easily fund its defense, cannot resist geopolitical pressure, and risks buckling under the additional weight of global conflict. In September, Britain introduced mandatory digital ID cards for all workers. Officials described the measure as a modernization step. Critics, however, have branded it Checkpoint Britain. Civil liberties groups warn that the system opens the door to sweeping state surveillance, with centralized databases capable of tracking citizens' movements, work, and personal choices. Already, 1.6 million people have signed petitions demanding the plan's repeal. Yet the government pushes ahead. Once such an infrastructure is in place, its reach can expand easily, from work to travel, healthcare, even participation in politics. In times of crisis, that kind of power becomes irresistible to governments. And what begins in Britain could become a template across other nations. While Europe stumbles, China surges forward. Its newest carrier, the Fujian, sailed defiantly through the Taiwan Strait, an unmistakable challenge to both US and Taiwanese forces. In the South China Sea, Chinese vessels confront Philippine ships, blocking and ramming them to pressure Manila into retreat. Diplomatically, Beijing continues to forge new alignments. With Russia and India, it transforms BRICS from an economic club into a political counterweight to the West, a bloc with the scale to reshape global balance. Should conflict erupt in Europe or the Pacific, these alliances guarantee it won't remain local. It will cascade outward, drawing in nations across the globe. Extremist groups add yet another layer of instability. Hamas survives even after devastating blows, spreading influence across the region. The Houthis disrupt global shipping with drone and missile attacks in the Red Sea. In Africa, conflicts escalate. In Rwanda, ethnic violence described as genocidal. In Syria, years of war continue to fuel jihadist recruitment. These crises drive mass migration into Europe and the West. Millions fleeing war-strain already divided societies, fueling political polarization and empowering radical movements on both left and right. This cycle of war, extremism, and migration destabilizes entire continents. Instability no longer comes only from borders being crossed or skies being patrolled. Across continents, wars rage relentlessly, fueled by long-standing rivalries and fractured leadership. In many regions, conflicts that should have been resolved decades ago flare back to life, leaving cities in ruin and populations in chaos. Meanwhile, across nations, self-centered politicians pursue short-term gains over long-term stability, entrenching themselves in office, weakening institutions, and inflaming divisions rather than uniting citizens. Battles continue over territory, resources, and influence, with no signs of ceasefires or negotiations taking hold. Political stalemates leave major crises unresolved, from energy shortages to mounting debt, while public frustration boils over, as seen in countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Indonesia, where corrupted regimes have been ousted by citizens. Civilians bear the cost while leaders' calculations dominate decisions, turning conflicts into instruments of power and deepening societal divides. Across the globe, the message is clear. The world is caught in a cycle of conflict. Wars that should be stepping stones toward stability instead intensify division, weaken institutions, and strain alliances. Self-interest, rivalries, and the pressures of mass migration amplify instability at home and abroad, leaving entire regions on edge and uncertainty spreading far beyond borders. What emerges is a pattern that can no longer be ignored. Drones and fighter jets probe NATO's defenses. American and Israeli strikes ripple across the Middle East. The European Union faces charges of interference that erode public trust in democracy. Industrial heartlands across Europe see factories close under the weight of soaring energy costs and regulations. Governments tighten their grip with digital surveillance. China rises with Russia and India, building alliances designed to counter the West. Extremist groups fuel war, migration, and unrest on every front. These are not isolated crises. They are interconnected, threads woven into the same fabric of global chaos. And history offers a warning. World wars rarely ignite from a single spark. They erupt when many sparks converge at once. So, are we heading to World War III? The powder keg is full. A drone shot down in Poland, a jet miscalculation in Estonia, a strike in the South China Sea, an election crisis tearing a nation apart. Any one of these could be the trigger. The danger is not theoretical. It is unfolding now. The only question: will humanity recognize it before the fire spreads beyond control? This is Doomsday Broadcast. Which flashpoint do you fear most? Comment below. Like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most dangerous scenarios.